And so, dear friend, I am coming to you on this fine evening with something a little bit different. I'm here at the National Arts Club here in Mary, New York, where Lauren and Abby of American Duchess are celebrating the release of their newest publication on 18th century beauty by demonstrating for us the magic of said 18th century hairstyling live. You may already be familiar with American Duchess, the glorious historical reproduction footwear brand that, as you may know, I pretty much wear almost exclusively, and no, nothing in this here video is sponsored. Lauren and Abby have very kindly allowed me to bring you along for the evening, so put the kettle on, take up your needles, and let's find out precisely how to achieve those lofty 18th century confections, whilst of course busting a few myths along the way.
What's fascinating about 18th century hair is the change in texture that our hair products do. Going to the basics of 18th century hair products, we have pomade and powder. Pomade is an animal fat based pomade. Recipes range from different animals, but usually it's going to be a pig lard based fat and then lamb tallow or mutton tallow. Mutton tallow is hard and crumbly. Pig's lard is very soft and creamy. By mixing them together, you actually create a really nice paste. And then it is a scented product as well, so you must render it, clean it, de-stink it, so it does not smell like bacon. The recipe that we use in the book is what we're using for Leia's hair. It's scented with clove and lemon oil. Clove actually is used as a natural pest deterrent, so just very quickly, no, this did not attract bugs, no, it did not attract lice, no, it did not attract fleas. Let's just nix that myth right in the tuchus. So the first step is putting on pomade. You take modern hair, which is very shiny and smooth, just like what we like in the 21st century. Shiny equals clean, shiny equals healthy, and all this other nonsense, which is actually true. And then once the hair is pomaded, then that's when you add the powder. Powder was a starch-based product in the 18th century. Traditionally, it was wheat starch. The powder will react with the animal fat. And if you've ever made a cake, it's like baking. So the starch expands, and all of a sudden you go from having really fine, thin hair that doesn't do anything, to all of a sudden you have like Pantene Pro V Herbal Essence, and you're just like whoosh. And it's sculptable and it's moldable, because it has all this texture and it has this tackiness that is very subtle to it, so you can really shape and form the hair once it's been pomaded and powder. All of a sudden look from looking wet to now it's like light and fluffy and airy and soft. That's what happens when you pomade and powder hair.
Of course, they did not have hairspray in the 18th century, so how did they do those really big styles without the hair going all over the place? Interestingly, the pomade and the powder is also how people cleaned their hair. They didn't regularly take baths and showers the way that we do today. That doesn't mean that they were dirty, nasty people. It just means that they cleaned themselves in other ways. One of the ways that they dealt with hair is to do the pomading and the powdering. We today go, okay, I've done my 18th century hair. I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna wash this out with shampoo, and I'm gonna go back to normal 21st century life tomorrow. Of course, they're not doing that in the 18th century. They are continuing to put on more pomade and more powder and comb it through. So the next thing that Abby is going to do is she's going to part Leia's hair. She's going to part the hair into sections that will later be styled. We do this with modern styling as well. You're gonna work on the front of the hair, you don't want to deal with the back all together at the same time. And then we're going to put a cushion on Leia's head. This is the cushion. That's the cushion. This is made out of wool knit, and it is stuffed with horsehair. You'll notice there's a hole in the middle of this, so we call this the donut. She's going to make an anchor for this to go over. So she's going to grab the hair right off the crown, braid it, and coil it into a sort of a top knot. We'll put the cushion over the top, and then we'll pin down into the hole, into the braid, so that it doesn't wiggle around. In the 1770s, hair starts to ascend. The really, really, really big hairstyles that we equate with the 18th century were actually only in fashion for a relatively short time. About 1772 to 1775 or so. By 1776, the hair starts to widen out at the top. It is still very high, and it slopes up in the back, and that's what this cushion is going to create. It's difficult to see it now, but you can see how there's like a little whoop up at the back. When we put the hair on this, and of course it's going to add a lot of volume on top, and she will have hair that's higher in the back than it is in the front.
This is what would support the ship. So these would be fairly soft to fairly hard supports. They would have buckram in them. They could potentially be even wired. And Leonard, who created this design, he would have these made, and then they would go on top of the head. So this is also where the height comes from. Not necessarily the hairstyle itself, but what is put on top of the hairstyle after it is done. So Leia's cushion is actually very small. I'm almost a little concerned it's too small. But she has so much hair that the hair itself is going to be built on top of it, and that's going to add height. But once we add the poof, all of a sudden it's going to go from like here to like there. Because of the gauze, the ribbons, the flowers, the bits on top of it, that's where the height comes from. When we look at these images of these women in the 18th century, we hear these mythologies, this idea that everything was like 3 feet tall, everything. But when you actually start looking at the portraiture in the 18th century, and you start looking at the proportions, you'll realize it's not actually that tall in the front. It might be that tall in the back or close to it, but usually it's the hair bits that really amp it up. Most of the time the front is usually about a forehead. So we're looking at maybe 4 or 5 inches. That's it in the front. And then it's what's on top of it that helps push it up. So proportion in the 18th century is very, very important because you want to balance out your outfit. Hair shapes in the 18th century shift very, very quickly. This is actually one of the reasons why we focused on the last half of the 18th century instead of the entire 18th century in the book. To go back to what Lauren's doing right now really quickly, is she has started taking Leia's hair and smoothing it up and over and into the hole in the cushion. There are multiple ways you could do 18th century cushions, but frankly having a hole in it makes it a lot easier because if you have really long hair, if you have a hole, you can push the hair down to the hole. If it's super long with Leia, she can actually pull it then back out and curl it and lay it on top and organize it that way. But by having a hole or a donut shape essentially in your hair cushion, you can hide a lot of sin. And they hid a lot of sin in the 18th century. So I was just asked how often do they actually wash their hair? The answer is unless they have to medically, they don't.
More pomade, more powder.
The key to this is combing your hair. So when you read 18th century hairdressing manuals, they're always very adamant. Comb your hair, comb your hair, comb your hair, comb your hair. Every day, comb your hair. If you don't comb your hair, it's going to get itchy. You can get dandruff, you can get bits. So combing your hair helps pull the powder and the pomade away from the scalp. It helps run it through the hair. It helps remove the oils from the hair and run it down. Now, combs in the 18th century were made of horn and bone, so they're much better at pulling oils away than our plastic and silicone combs are today. Now, we are using modern hair combs because I have looked for a good horn hair comb. They are not easy to find. They did have colored powders in the 18th century. They did have a good time with that. So there are historic recipes for pink hair powder, blue hair powder, yellow hair powder, brown hair powder, black hair powder, the whole spectrum of different hair powder colors, gray as well. So depending on what was trendy, you could actually play with temporary hair colors as well.
When we get into the 1790s, hair powder kind of starts to fall out of favor. You get a nice Dessevier kind of look going on. There's a lot more humanism and pastoralism coming in to all parts of art and society, including fashion. And so there is a bit of a sea change with what is desirable, and the English style comes forward in particularly menswear, but also women's wear. And it begins to, let's not say overtake the French, not to insult any French people, but it has a heavy influence on what is being worn in Paris at the same time. Hair powder by the mid-1790s or so, because of laws and revolutions, I guess, falls out of favor. People are still wearing hair powder, but not nearly in the quantities that they were. You had to have a special certificate to buy it. Yes, it was heavily, heavily taxed. In England, good point. And so hygiene begins to change, whether it's because of that or it was happening anyway through scientific study with hygiene changing, bathing becoming more of a thing. it all happened in this period. It's a major, major period in history in which so many things societally and fashionably are changing. What is the stick that Abby was using, or the bar? It looks like soap. It is not soap. You cannot stick this shadow back onto you with this. It is hard pomade. This is made with the lamb's tallow, the pig's lard, and beeswax. It's a harder, more crumbly version of the pomade, and it is a great tool for making hair stick straight up. It's stiffer, it's harder, it helps with keeping the hair up, especially in a very curly style like I have. My hair kind of wants to fall forward up here, and so I would use this to get it to stand straight up. It's a common misconception that all women wore wigs. Men wore wigs for certain things. Court appearances, for instance, men would wear a peruke. It's very obvious when they're doing it because you can see a hard hairline and you can see the powder on the forehead and sometimes on the collar too. But you don't really see that in portraiture of women. So what we found is that women depicted in wigs on purpose, it was usually satire. It was making fun of the woman for being vain or dirty or old. Women definitely wore hair pieces. You could buy hair pieces. You could buy what's called a toupee, which is what's making up 90% of my hair. You could buy a chignon if you didn't have anything in the back, like I don't.
You have very short hair.
I do. I have a little pixie bob. And you could buy buckles, which are the large curls that are on the side of the head. You could stack as many of somebody else's hair buckles up the side of your head as you wanted. These were all readily available. Anybody could buy them. They were not expensive. They were made from human hair, because that's what reacts nicely with the pomade and powder. It's what was available. And you get it in a matching color. So that is completely historically accurate. But a full wig with a hard hairline for women was not a thing. So even if you just had a tweed little bit of hair in the front, you would want to blend that in because you want to hide the fact that you might be wearing hair pieces and wigs. It wasn't something to be ashamed of, but it's not something that you would want like an obvious display of that going on. Yes, men were wearing wigs in some instances. Men were also wearing their natural hair in some instances. It was pomaded and powdered because it's the way that you're cleaning your hair. You could corral your ponytail at the back, your chignon at the back in a, what's the name of the bag? The cube, that's what it is. Or you could let it hang down in a nice little curl. There are lots and lots and lots of portraits of men with powder all over their collars. So yes, it was a thing that men were doing, and they were not ashamed of it, they weren't trying to hide it. What did the common folk do for their hairstylists? We get this question a lot. They pomaded and powdered their hair. It is the way that people were cleaning their hair. The cushions that they were using would not have been as big or extravagant. They weren't going to be putting ostrich feathers in their hair. But a little bit of volume in the front. Even today, you get up, no matter what socioeconomic class you are, and you do something with your hair. Some people do nothing with their hair. They put on a baseball cap. Some people spend hours curling their hair. It doesn't matter what class they are. People still wanted to be clean and well kept. The hairpins were wire, like steel wire. They came in all different sizes. You could get really long ones. Don't we wish we could get those today? You could get little short ones. The pomading and powder started in the 17th century with Louis XIV's mistress, the Marquise de Montespan, according to people in the 18th century writing about that. I've seen portraits in the way back to the early 17th century and the late 16th century where it kind of looks like they might be pomading and powdering their hair, but I haven't found resources for it yet. It's a really, really good question because of the way that hygiene changes, but more importantly, why? Why did they do that? Why is this the only period where they take animal fat and they combine it with starch?
In our book, like we said earlier, Lauren and I were very adamant that we wanted to represent a broad spectrum of women for this book. We did not want it to be white, females, brown hair. That's very boring. We wanted to show different hair textures and different hair types because costumers, specifically historic costumers, were all over the place. You know, it's not just for one group of people to enjoy. Historic costuming has a wonderfully diverse community, as do reenactors, theaters, movies, you know, it's not about that. It's about everyone in the community, and we wanted everyone to feel included. However, we understood that the Black American experience is not something that we could write about, and that it's something that needs to be addressed. And so we asked Cheney, who's from Not Your Mama's History, who is a friend and a living historian. She works actually for the New York Historical Society now, as well as her own company, Not Your Mama's History, and she interprets the Black experience in the 18th century, whether it's as an enslaved individual or as a freed individual. We asked Cheney to write an essay about African American hair in the 18th century, and also a bit about the issue of cultural appropriation. Cheney.
When I first came to reenacting, I was told Black women wore what white women wore, but just dirtier. And I was like, right. So, started my journey. I decided to do the research myself. There were a lot of people out there doing that research. It was just in academic circles. So going out, I started my journey, and people started reaching out to me, sending me images, portraiture, and so I started also reading accounts. We get a lot of descriptions. For example, the description of my head wrap here from the early 1770s was from a white observer observing two women coming home from a church service. And so I was able to kind of suss out, get this together from that description. We have accounts of African men and women just powdering their hair. So because they could achieve, especially toward the hairstyles of the later 18th century, they're just molding their hair into the form and then powdering it. Not always because that is cleaning it, but they're imitating the styles. I found that people who, enslaved persons that worked in the household, the enslavers had more control over what they were wearing, whereas people who were working out in the fields, it was more of a hands-off approach.
How would they obtain the fabrics they used to cover their hair?
Very good question. So there's really two ways. The first is an allotment. In both the 18th and 19th century, enslavers are allotting a certain amount of cloth for their enslaved to wear, almost always in the 19th century. And then enslaved persons have side hustles. Sometimes it was, right? So in Williamsburg, chickens were the enterprise of enslaved persons. So most likely if you were in Virginia and you bought a chicken in a city center, most likely it was from someone who was enslaved. Sometimes it was the enslaver knew about it. Most of the time, it was a side hustle. And so they bought this stuff themselves. So you'll see things like this. So what I'm wearing, this is Negro cloth, my petticoat. And then you see these beautiful shoes. But my buckles are actually brass and simply made. And then I have a silk head wrap on.
So you can see how the shape of the cushion amplifies the poof and how it shows it off. So when she's walking, you can see it, you can enjoy it. She has plenty of height there as well. But what happens if she needs to go outside? And it's raining. We created something called a calash bonnet based off originals. And it will fit. We know this. So you can make your own. I'll tell you, if you want to get a lot of looks in New York City, you wear one of these. Yeah, ask us how we know. But so the clash bonnet would go over top of it. You can see because it is boned, it is rigid. It surrounds the hair, but it does not crush the hair. So it protects the hair as well. These could actually come in oiled silk, which means they would be waterproof. So it could actually act as protectant from the rain, which is amazing. But let me tell you, if you catch a strong breeze, like you're walking the wrong direction down, yeah, it's not good. So you have the ribbon to hold it in place so that way you don't accidentally choke yourself. And this is actually something that you see in the 18th century all the way up through the 19th century, and at that point they called them uglies. So, and the pink is really lovely because the pink actually is there to help reflect light onto the face, to help encourage that lovely glow. So that's why you see a lot of things lined in rose or pink colored silks. You also can see things lined in black silk because that acts as the absorbent of the sun. So if it's sunny outside, having something lined in black silk absorbs the sun, so it helps shade your eyes. But if for some reason you're in a darker place, white silk, if you feel like getting blinded, white silk.
There is a myth about lead-based makeup. Yes, some women wore white lead-based makeup on their faces, just like some women get Botox or some women wear different types of creams or implants today. Was it the norm? No. Was it known to be dangerous? Yes. It's written about in many of the primary sources that we read how bad lead is to put on your face. No. So they knew about it at the time. It was not the norm. That leads into something really important that we did not discuss, which is makeup.
No, we
kind of were just like, there.
We're going to give you all a very quick version.
Very, very quick. Obviously, concealer, mascara, heavy eyebrow pencils, like we use today, were not the thing in the 18th century, but they were wearing a lot of rouge. Abby and I are both wearing a lot of rouge. It's a beautiful liquid rouge that looks good on everybody's skin type, and its base was brandy. So it smells good too, and you can have a little devil if you want.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. They knew that was bad too. For eyebrows, they would burn a clove and use the clove, like an eyebrow pencil. They would color their lips with various different kinds of pigmented lip salves. But it was about the natural beauty coming out of your skin. Leia, her skin is just luminous, and part of that is because her hair has been powdered white, and it changes the whole look of the face. It gives a totally different appearance, and so darkening the eyebrows and giving a lot of flesh to the cheeks sort of grounds the face so you don't look washed out when your hair is powdered white. You have blonde hair, so if we were to pomade and powder your hair, we would need to darken your eyebrows and your lips and your cheeks just so you weren't like...
And when you look at beauty books, and if you guys are curious, you can actually find a lot of these for free on Google Books. Toilette de Fleur is one of the most iconic ones. It was written, I think, about 1772, and it's a craft book for home. So you too can make your own makeup at home. Have fun figuring out the proportions because 18th century cookbooks, not helpful. Like a little bit of this, and then some of that over there, and mix it up, pour it in a pot, have a good time. Okay, what? But most of those recipes are actually skincare. So you have cold creams, you have pomatums for the face, you have wrinkle removers, you have acne removers, you have line smoothers, you have suppleness, you have different scents and different types, you have hand creams. And then you have like rouge and lip salves. But it's really about maintaining what you have and that inner beauty coming out. It ties into what Cheney was saying. 18th century was your outside is a reflection of your inside. So you, as a woman, had to walk this very fine line of looking put together, neat, tidy, and pretty, but you don't want to look gaudy. You don't want to look over the top because that reflects poorly on you as your inside. If you look like a hot mess on the outside, people are going to assume you're a hot mess. So it's a different way of thinking. And so Toilette de Fleur, it really addresses the idea of taking care of what you have. And we really wanted to amplify that and really stress that in the book because of the whole mythology around the white face and the bright pink cheeks and the velvet mouches all over your face and But in reality, look at the portraiture. It's very, very natural. It's very, very natural. It's about what you already have and amplifying what you already have. And like Lauren was saying, when we started pomading and powdering hair, what we discovered is it makes your features pop forward. If you put the rouge on, like your eyebrows, you need to darken them just a little bit because all of a sudden it just makes your eyes the focus. it brings all the attention here to the face. So just a little bit of color, a little bit of eyebrow pencil, and all of a sudden, it's all about this. How good this looks, right? So that's what it's about. Maintaining what you have, take care of it, and amplify what you already have.
So, I don't know about you, but I am mildly less intimidated by 18th century hair now, and might have to give this a go at some point. It should be noted that this evening was part of the National Arts Club's FashionSpeak Friday series, which are free evening lectures on various fashion-related topics and are open to the public. So if you are looking for something posh and educational to do whilst you're in the city on a Friday, I highly recommend checking it out. I'll put a link to that below, along with the full American Duchess guide to 18th century beauty if you care to investigate further into some fancy Georgian hair and makeup things. Meanwhile, I think I promised to make you a video about a dress, so I should probably get back to that. Anon, friend.
I've got a bun. I've got a bun. Hey, I've got a bun. Find your light, Wellington.